Lena's hands were shaking a little as she fixed her shoes. She had just passed through immigration at the airport and was about to board her flight when her phone buzzed. It was a message from her fiancé, Toba. It said, "Come outside. It's urgent." Lena thought maybe he forgot to give her something, or just wanted one last hug before she left. She smiled a little and walked back, hoping for a sweet moment. But when she saw him standing outside, something felt wrong. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't even looking at her properly. Then he spoke, cold and sharp. He said, "I can't do this anymore, Lena. I met someone better. She's already in Dubai." Lena just froze, like her whole body stopped working for a second. Then he added, "Your dreams are too simple. You don't fit into mine anymore." Those words hit her like a slap. She had supported him in every way, believed in him, stood by him. And now, in this place where people hug goodbye and say, "I'll miss you," he was leaving her like she was nothing. But Lena didn't cry. She didn't ask why. She didn't beg him to change his mind. She simply looked at him one last time, turned around, and walked back into the airport. Her steps were slow. Each one felt heavy, like her heart was breaking more with every move. Inside, she was falling apart, but outside, she held her head high. She wasn't just walking to her gate. She was walking away from a future she thought she had, and into the unknown, alone. Lena sat down in her seat on the plane, her legs weak and her chest tight. She tried her best to hold it together, but it felt like her whole world had just fallen apart. Her eyes were tired from holding back tears, and her hands were clenched tightly in her lap. She didn't want to cry in front of strangers, but the pain inside her was heavy. She turned her face to the window, hoping no one would see how broken she felt. The man sitting beside her noticed her right away. He didn't stare, but he could see that something was very wrong. Her hands were shaking slightly, and her eyes were red, like someone who had just heard the worst news. In a gentle voice, he asked, "Are you okay?" Lena didn't answer. She didn't even look at him. She just kept her eyes on the clouds outside the window, blinking fast to stop the tears from falling. He didn't ask again. He gave her space, showing respect without pressure. A few minutes later, the flight attendant came over, holding a card. She smiled politely and said, "I'm sorry, this card declined. Do you have another one?" Lena's heart dropped. That card wasn't hers. It was Toba's, the one he had told her to use for everything. Now it was useless. Panic filled her chest, and she felt the heat of shame rush to her face. She didn't know what to say or do. She froze, too embarrassed to speak. Before Lena could even open her mouth, the man beside her quietly pulled out his own card and handed it to the flight attendant. He didn't say much, just 3 simple words. "She's with me." His voice was calm and sure, without any hesitation. He didn't look at Lena for thanks. He didn't ask for anything in return. It was like he just wanted to help someone in pain without making her feel worse. Lena sat there in shock, unsure how to react. No one had ever stood up for her like that, especially not a stranger. She wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come out. For the first time that day, she felt a tiny bit of comfort, not because someone paid for her, but because someone noticed her pain and chose kindness over questions. It was a small moment, but for Lena, it meant everything. After the flight landed, Lena slowly gathered her things, still feeling the weight of everything that had happened. She didn't expect the man beside her to say anything more, but as they stepped into the airport, he turned to her and finally spoke with a soft smile. "I'm Jelani," he said. His voice was calm, the kind that made you feel safe. He didn't ask her name right away. He didn't force a conversation. He just walked beside her like someone who understood silence. There was something strong about him, not loud or proud, but quiet strength. The kind that doesn't try to fix everything, just stays close while you figure things out. Lena felt it. She didn't know why, but something about him made her want to breathe again. They sat at a small cafe inside the airport, and for a while, they just shared a quiet coffee. No pressure, no small talk, just peace. Then, without even planning to, Lena's heart cracked open. Maybe it was the silence, maybe it was his kindness, but suddenly, the words poured out. She told him everything, how she met Toba, how much she loved him, how she gave everything to support his dream, even selling her mother's jewelry to help fund his business. how she stayed up late helping him with his projects, and how, right when it was her turn to chase her dream abroad, he left her at the airport, saying she wasn't ambitious enough. Her voice shook. Her hands trembled. She felt raw and foolish, like she'd been blind for so long. But Jelani didn't laugh. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't pity her either. He simply looked into her eyes and said softly, "People like him, they see love as a transaction, like giving only if they can take. But you," he paused, "you give without a receipt." Lena blinked, tears filling her eyes again. Not from pain this time, but from feeling understood. Those words, "you give without a receipt," they stayed with her. No one had ever said something so true, so clear about her heart. She had always been someone who loved deeply, gave freely, and never expected anything in return. And for the first time, someone saw that as strength, not weakness. She would never forget that moment, not just because of what was said, but because of who said it. A stranger named Jelani, who showed up in her worst hour and reminded her of her worth. Lena stepped off the plane in Cape Town with nothing but a small suitcase and her quiet pain. She had no one to meet her, no house waiting, no clear plan, just herself, her degree, and the heavy memory of being left at the airport by the man she once loved. Everything felt new and scary. She found a small, simple room to rent. It wasn't much, just a bed, a chair, and a window, but it was hers. A fresh start. Each morning, she woke up early, got dressed, and walked around the city with her file of certificates, dropping her CV at different schools. She applied to 5 places in the first week. No calls yet, but she didn't give up. To keep herself busy, she began offering free tutoring to children in her neighborhood. Word spread. One mother told another, and soon she had a few regular students. She didn't charge them anything. She just wanted to teach again, to feel useful, to connect, to build something from scratch. Some days were hard. Some nights she cried into her pillow, asking herself why love had to be so painful, why Toba had left her so coldly, so quickly. But each morning, she stood up and tried again. Sometimes her phone buzzed, and it would be Jelani. A simple message, "How are you today?" Or, "Don't forget to eat." Every time he texted, her heart fluttered a little. His words were never too much, never too heavy. He gave her space, but he never disappeared. He didn't ask for anything. He was just there. But Lena kept her walls up. She didn't want to fall too fast, not again. The scar from Terminal 3 still stung. She wasn't ready to trust, not yet. Not even someone as kind as Jelani. Still, there was a part of her that smiled whenever his name popped up on her screen. She was starting over, yes, but with a scar she couldn't hide. A scar that reminded her of the betrayal, the heartbreak, the way her dreams almost died before they even began. But also a scar that showed she survived. She got on that flight. She didn't fall apart. She didn't run home. Cape Town wasn't in her original plan, but maybe this was the plan she needed. A place to heal, a place to grow, a place to figure out who she was, with or without love. Lena didn't expect much from the free tutoring she offered. She just wanted to help, to feel useful again. Among the kids she was teaching was a quiet little girl named Nomsa. Nomsa rarely spoke, and when she did, her words came out slow and soft. Other children her age were far ahead, but Nomsa struggled. Lena didn't push too hard. She just spoke to her with kindness, used pictures and games, and gave her time. Every day, she sat with Nomsa patiently, encouraging her gently. Then one day, something amazing happened. During a session, Nomsa looked up and clearly said, "Teacher Lena, I like this book." Lena froze for a moment. It was the first full sentence Nomsa had ever spoken. From that day on, it was like a door open. Nomsa started talking more, smiling more, even playing with other children. Her progress was fast, too fast to ignore. A few days later, a well-dressed man knocked on Lena's door. He introduced himself as Nomsa's father. He said he'd heard about how his daughter had started speaking, and he was deeply grateful. Then he smiled and said something that left Lena speechless. "I own one of the top international schools in the country. We need someone like you, someone with heart, not just a degree. I want you to join us. Full salary, free accommodation, and a full support team." Lena couldn't believe it. She blinked, thinking maybe she was dreaming. She had applied to so many schools and heard nothing. And now, here was an offer she never imagined. Her hand shook slightly as she nodded and said yes. Later that night, She sat on her small bed and thought about Toba, about how he once told her that her dreams were too small, that she was too simple. But look at her now. That simple dream of helping children had just opened the door to a life-changing opportunity. It wasn't just a job, it was a platform, a beginning, a chance to help even more children, to grow something meaningful, and all of it started with kindness, with giving. Even when she had nothing, the universe had seen her heart, and it answered back in a big way. Lena smiled for the first time in weeks, not just with her lips, but from deep inside. Her dream wasn't small, it was powerful, and she was just getting started. Lena stood at the education conference, holding a small cup of juice and smiling as she listened to other speakers. It had been months since she arrived in Cape Town, months since she started over, built her life again, and found purpose in her work. She was no longer the broken girl who had walked through the airport with tears in her eyes. She was now a respected teacher and the keynote speaker of the entire event. Just as she turned to speak with someone, she felt a light tap on her shoulder. She turned around and her heart almost stopped. Toba. He stood there, looking nothing like the man she remembered. His suit was wrinkled, his shoes dusty, and his eyes carried a strange mix of regret and hope. He looked tired, smaller somehow, not just in body, but in spirit. "Lena," he said, his voice low, almost uncertain. She didn't speak, just stared for a second, still surprised. He gave a weak smile, rubbing the back of his neck like he didn't know what to say. "You look different." Lena finally found her voice, steady and calm. "I am," she said. She looked him straight in the eyes. "Stronger, smarter." Toba blinked, clearly taken aback. He hadn't expected that. He looked around the hall, then back at her. "I heard you were speaking here. I didn't know you'd come this far." Lena smiled gently, not with pride, but with peace. "You didn't need to know. It wasn't for you." He swallowed hard. Then, like the truth was too heavy to hold, he finally said it. "My startup failed. The girl I left you for, she left too. Said I was too unstable." There it was. The fall. The same man who once told her she was too simple, not enough, had now come full circle. Life had humbled him. Lena didn't say anything more. She didn't gloat. She didn't throw his words back at him. She simply looked at him, nodded once, and walked away. That moment was her closure, not in loud words, not in revenge, but in calm power. She didn't need to prove anything to him. Her success, her peace, her growth, they spoke louder than any insult he had ever thrown at her. And as she returned to the stage to speak, her voice was firm, her head held high, and her heart finally free from the hurt he once caused. She had healed, she had risen, and now she was untouchable. Lena's speech ended with loud claps and standing applause, but she didn't know that someone in the audience had recorded the whole thing on their phone and uploaded it to social media that same evening. In the video, Lena stood confidently on stage, holding the microphone with calm strength. Her voice was steady, but full of emotion. She said something simple, yet powerful. "Teaching is not just about books. It's about restoring belief. I know this because someone once broke mine." That one line touched hearts. People paused, replayed it, shared it. Within hours, the video started gaining views. Hundreds, then thousands. By the next morning, it had already hit over 1 million. People from all over the world, teachers, parents, students, felt connected to her words. They commented things like, "This woman speaks truth," and "She reminded me why I started teaching." Soon, news pages picked it up, blogs wrote about her story, and the title everyone used. From airport tears to academic triumph, the headline was catchy, but the story behind it, Lena's story, was what really mattered. A woman left behind at an airport, a heart broken by betrayal. But instead of giving up, she had risen, step by step, with nothing but her courage, her skills, and her quiet strength. And then, there was one comment under the video that stopped everyone. "She's the woman I gave my card to. Jelani." Simple, just that one sentence. But it spread like wildfire. People started asking, who is Jelani? Is he the reason she made it? Where is he now? Some even called him the silent hero, the stranger on the plane who stepped in with no questions asked, when Lena had no one else. The comment didn't just bring more attention to Lena's story. It reminded people that sometimes All it takes is one act of kindness to change a life. One person who sees you, even when you're invisible to the rest. Lena saw the video days later. At first, she was shocked. Then she cried, but not from pain. This time, the tears were full of gratitude. Not just for the success, but for the journey, the growth, and for Jelani, who had helped her in silence, without expecting anything in return. That video didn't just go viral, it started a movement. A reminder that belief can be broken, but it can also be rebuilt. And sometimes a stranger's kindness is all it takes to light the fire again. Lena and Jelani started talking again, slowly and softly, like old friends finding their way back. There was no rush, no pressure, no pretending. Just simple conversations filled with comfort. They would check on each other now and then, laugh about small things, and share thoughts that mattered. Jelani visited her school once. He didn't come with flowers or loud surprises. He just sat quietly at the back of her class and watched her teach. He saw how her eyes lit up when the children understood something. He noticed how gently she spoke to each child, especially the shy one. After class, he helped her arrange books in the library. Another time, he rolled up his sleeves and helped her paint the library walls, splashing paint by mistake and making her laugh for the first time in days. They didn't talk about the past. They didn't talk much about the future either. But in the quietness between them, something strong was building, something real. One evening, they sat outside together after a school event. The sky was full of stars, and a soft breeze passed through. Jelani looked at her for a moment, then spoke gently. I didn't step in because I wanted anything. I stepped in because I saw someone who deserved everything. Lena felt something shift in her heart. She didn't say anything right away, but her eyes filled with tears. Not the kind that come from pain, but from being understood. That's when she knew. Love doesn't always arrive with noise. It doesn't always shout or demand or take up space. Sometimes love is quiet, patient, kind. It shows up to help carry chairs. It listens without interrupting. It watches you become who you are meant to be and smiles, proud. Jelani never tried to fix her. He never told her what to do. He just stood beside her, holding space, giving support, and reminding her that she was never as alone as she once felt. For the first time in a long time, Lena felt safe. Not because someone promised her forever, but because someone proved they could be present today. It wasn't a movie scene. It wasn't fireworks or loud music. It was two people sitting under the stars, knowing that whatever this was, it was honest, and it felt like home. 1 year later, Jelani took Lena back to the very same airport, the same place where her heart had once been broken, the same gate where she had walked away with tears in her eyes and pain in her chest. But this time, everything felt different. The air didn't feel heavy. Her hands weren't shaking. Her heart wasn't afraid, because this time, she wasn't boarding alone. Jelani held her hand as they walked through the airport. He kept smiling at her like he had a little secret. Lena was curious, but she didn't ask. When they got to the check-in desk, he gently pulled out a folder and handed it to her. Open it, he said softly. Lena slowly opened the folder. Inside, she found papers that made her eyes widen in shock. First, there was a document showing a full scholarship fund in her name, a fund that would help young girls who wanted to be teachers just like her. Then, there was a contract for a book deal. A publisher wanted her to write her story, her journey from heartbreak to healing, from being lost to being found. And at the back of the folder was a small note, handwritten by Jelani. It said, "This is just the layover. Our forever begins now." Lena froze. Her hands covered her mouth. The tears came quickly, but this time, they weren't from sadness. These were tears of joy, deep, full, quiet joy that filled every part of her heart. She looked up at Jelani, who was watching her with the softest eyes. "I wanted to bring you back here," he said, "so you could see that sometimes life brings you back to the same place, but with a different story." She didn't need grand speeches. She didn't need loud music or big surprises. This feeling of being seen, valued, and loved was enough. At that same gate where she once felt thrown away, she now stood tall, loved, and honored. She wasn't just someone's broken past anymore. She was a woman with a purpose, a future, and someone who believed in her deeply. They boarded the plane together, hand in hand, not running from the past, but walking boldly into a beautiful future. Toba once believed that walking away from Lena was a smart move. He thought he was trading her quiet love for something more exciting, more ambitious. In his mind, He was upgrading. He imagined Lena would stay stuck, maybe crying over him, maybe begging to come back. But time has a funny way of revealing the truth. One evening, as he sat alone flipping through TV channels, he paused. There she was, Lena, on a national stage. Her smile was confident, her voice calm and powerful. She was signing copies of her book, telling her story to millions. Behind her stood students, teachers, and leaders who now looked up to her. And right beside her, holding her hand gently, was Jelani, the same man who once quietly paid for her declined ticket, the same man who had seen her worth from the beginning. Toba stared at the screen, speechless. He couldn't believe the woman he once called not ambitious enough was now leading schools, inspiring a generation and changing lives. Suddenly, he saw everything he had missed, the quiet strength, the kindness, the fire in her soul. And for the first time, he realized he had never really known her. He never truly saw her. But Lena didn't wish him pain. She wasn't out for revenge. She didn't post bitter messages or try to prove him wrong. She simply became who she was always meant to be. She healed. She grew. She soared. Not to show off, but because she finally believed in herself. And when people asked her how she got here, she smiled and said just one thing. Some women aren't meant to be saved. They're meant to be recognized by the right man at the right gate. Lena had not just moved on. She had been reborn, stronger, softer, wiser, and most of all, free. Toba watched the screen until it faded. But in his heart, the regret stayed. Because while he had been chasing noise, he had lost a quiet miracle, one he would never get back. If Lena's story touched your heart, don't scroll without sharing this with someone who needs a reminder of their worth. Tag a queen who forgot she's powerful. Tag a man who needs to recognize a good woman before it's too late. Drop a heart if you believe real love sees you, even at your lowest. Save this if you're on your healing journey. Share this if you know. Some women aren't replaced, they rise.